The human had never seen anything like the place he had landed. The sky shimmered in colors he could not name, and enormous floating cities drifted like clouds above the ground. Strange creatures with translucent wings and glowing eyes moved gracefully between towering buildings that glimmered with light. The air was alive with a quiet hum, as though the world itself were breathing. He knew immediately that he was far from Earth, and yet he could not help but feel awe at the beauty and mystery around him. He had come here by accident, following a curiosity that had led him to a small, unusual spacecraft. It had been a journey, full of mistakes, miscalculations, and moments of fear. But now, standing at the edge of this alien world, he felt both excitement and uncertainty. Every step he took seemed to echo across the crystalline floor of the landing plaza. He looked around and saw beings that seemed humanoid but taller, more graceful, and exuding an aura of power he had never felt before. Among these beings, one figure stood out more than the rest. She wore a gown that seemed to shimmer with its own light, moving as if it had a life of its own. Her hair cascaded down her back like a river of silver, and her eyes sparkled with intelligence and a sharpness that could cut through stone. She walked with a confidence that demanded attention, and when she noticed the human, a small, amused smile spread across her lips. The human tried to straighten his posture, hoping to look brave instead of terrified. He had learned long ago that courage was sometimes just about pretending until the moment passed. But the princess's gaze was relentless, analyzing him in a way that made him feel like every mistake, every flaw was visible to her. "Who is this creature?" a voice whispered behind him. "I do not know," another voice answered. "But he is unusual." The princess stepped forward, her eyes locking onto the human's. "Unusual?" she repeated, her tone dripping with mockery. "You mean a human? How quaint. I did not expect one of your kind to appear in our city." "Did you take a wrong turn somewhere?" The human swallowed hard. He knew he could not run. Not here. Not in front of such powerful beings. Instead, he forced a small smile and said, I come in peace. I'm exploring your world, learning your culture." The princess laughed lightly, a sound like wind chimes. "Exploring? You barely know how to walk among us without tripping. How can you possibly understand anything of value?" She waved her hand, and some of the nobles around her chuckled in agreement. The human felt heat rise to his cheeks, but he held his ground. "I may not know much," he admitted calmly, "but I can learn, and I can try. Isn't that worth something?" The princess's eyes narrowed, and for a moment he thought he might have angered her further. But then a flicker of curiosity appeared. "You dare to speak to me as if you are equal?" Bold. Foolish, but bold. The human felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps he could show her that he was more than just a visitor, to be mocked. But the princess, it seemed, was not done. She clapped her hands once, and a group of attendants brought out a small platform. "Let us see how clever you truly are," she said. "You will face 3 challenges. If you succeed, perhaps you may earn a place here, though I doubt it." The first challenge was a puzzle that involved arranging glowing stones in a specific pattern. The stones moved under his fingers, almost alive, testing his patience and his mind. The princess watched with a small smirk, confident that he would fail. The human, however, took a deep breath, observing each stone carefully. He remembered a trick he had learned as a child. Sometimes the solution is not in force, but in observation. Slowly, methodically, he arranged the stones until they formed the correct pattern. The stones glowed brighter and lifted into the air, signaling his success. The court gasped. The princess's smile faltered just slightly. She said, trying to hide her surprise. "Lucky guess. Let us see the next test." The second challenge was a physical one. He had to navigate a series of floating platforms suspended above a bottomless chasm. Each platform shifted when stepped upon, testing balance, reflexes, and courage. The human hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward. He focused on each movement, keeping his eyes on the next platform, feeling the air around him. Step by step he moved, sometimes leaping, sometimes balancing carefully until he reached the end. The princess's eyes widened slightly. This human, fragile, ordinary by her standards, had not only survived but succeeded. Impressive. For a human, she said, her voice quieter now, tinged with something he could not name. The final challenge was not a puzzle or a physical trial, but a test of character. The princess presented him with a scenario, a simulated danger threatening the lives of innocent aliens. The human had to decide quickly how to act. Without hesitation, he directed the simulation, saving the virtual lives with clever strategy and empathy. The court murmured in astonishment. Even the princess seemed caught off guard. Perhaps, "You are not entirely useless," she said, though her pride prevented her from admitting any admiration. "But do not think that this changes anything. You are still a human, and your place is questionable here." The human nodded respectfully. "I understand, but I hope one day you might see that humans can contribute too, not just through strength or cleverness, but through heart." The princess looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. There was something in his eyes, a mixture of humility, courage, and determination, that stirred a strange feeling within her. She turned away abruptly, her emotions confusing her. She had never felt this way before, a mix of irritation, curiosity, and something she could not name. Later, as the human was led to a guest chamber, he could hear whispers among the court. Some nobles praised him quietly. Others doubted his staying power. The princess, however, retreated to her private quarters, pacing, trying to understand why she could not stop thinking about him. She had mocked him, tried to belittle him, yet something about his composure, his bravery, and his kindness had left a mark she did not expect. Meanwhile, the human could not sleep. The city was alive with soft lights and distant sounds, and he wondered what tomorrow would bring. He did not know the princess's thoughts, but he felt a strange sense of connection already, even from the first encounter. He resolved that he would not let fear or doubt stop him. He would learn, adapt, and earn his place here, not through force but through understanding and persistence. The night passed, and the first rays of the alien sun painted the sky in brilliant colors. The human gazed out at the floating cities, the strange wildlife, and the alien landscapes. He knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge him in ways he had never imagined. Somewhere, in the heart of the palace, the princess looked out over the city as well, her mind restless. She did not know it yet, but her pride and her heart were about to be tested in ways she had never anticipated. And thus began a story of unexpected encounters, challenges, and the subtle beginnings of a bond that would grow stronger with each passing day. The princess had mocked the human, thinking him weak and insignificant, but already, in ways neither of them fully understood, the first threads of respect and something more were beginning to weave between them. The morning sun bathed the alien city in colors that seemed almost unreal, shades of gold, pink, and violet blending in the sky. The human woke to the sounds of the city, soft humming from the floating buildings, the distant calls of creatures he had never seen before, and the gentle movement of air currents that made everything feel alive. He stretched, feeling a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Today would be different. Today he would begin to learn more about this world and, more importantly, about the princess who had unexpectedly captured his attention. He started by walking through the streets, taking in the incredible architecture. Buildings rose like towers of crystal, with staircases that twisted in ways he had never imagined. Bridges of light connected floating islands above the ground, and small flying creatures zipped past, some curious, some indifferent. Every step he took felt like he was walking in a dream. He tried to pay attention to the customs of the people around him, observing how they moved, greeted each other, and spoke. Despite his careful observation, he could not avoid attention. Nobles, attendants, and even ordinary citizens watched him, their expressions ranging from curiosity to amusement. He realized that being a human in this city made him stand out, but he decided to let that be his advantage. He smiled, nodded, respectfully, and greeted those who seemed willing to respond. Some smiled back, and a few even whispered words of encouragement. Slowly, he began to feel that he could belong here, even if just a little. Meanwhile, the princess observed him from the palace balcony. She was supposed to be preparing for her duties, but her mind kept wandering back to the human. She had thought that mocking him would end any thought of him as significant. Yet the way he moved, the calm in his manner, and his quiet determination puzzled her. How could someone so small, so fragile by her world standards, stand up to challenges and succeed where others might fail? She shook her head, trying to push the thought away, but it lingered. Later, the princess decided to make the human's next test a social one. She invited him to a grand luncheon with several nobles. The table was enormous, stretching almost like a bridge, and was filled with food he had never seen before: shimmering fruits, liquids that glowed softly, and bread-like things that floated above the plates for decoration. The nobles seated themselves with grace and precision, their movements almost like a dance. The human felt nervous, but he reminded himself that he had faced challenges before and could face this one too. The princess began with subtle teasing. She asked the human about his origins, about Earth, and about his culture. He answered politely, describing his world and its people. At first, the nobles laughed quietly at his answers, finding them quaint or naive. The princess herself smiled slightly, but this time it was different, less mocking, more curious. Then she decided to increase the difficulty. She asked questions that required not just knowledge, but wisdom and quick thinking. If you were in a situation where two planets were in conflict and innocent lives were at stake, what would you do? She asked, her eyes gleaming with challenge. The human thought carefully before speaking. I would look for a solution that protects life and finds common ground. Violence may sometimes be necessary, but it should be the last option. Understanding and dialogue are stronger than fear and force. A hush fell over the table. The nobles looked at him in surprise. The princess's eyes widened slightly. She had expected him to give a simple human answer or to stumble. Instead, he had spoken with clarity, thoughtfulness, and conviction. She found herself leaning forward slightly, curious despite herself. After the luncheon, the princess arranged a private tour for the human. She wanted to see how he would navigate her city without the help of attendants. As they walked, she pointed out buildings, gardens, and cultural sites, sometimes testing him with riddles or subtle challenges. The human struggled at times, but he never gave up. When he made mistakes, he admitted them honestly and tried again. At one point, they reached a bridge that spanned a deep chasm. Small creatures floated in the air, emitting soft lights. Tell me, human, the princess said, what do you feel when you look down here? He looked carefully before answering. At first, fear, but then wonder. There is danger, yes, but also beauty. I feel small, but also part of something bigger. I want to learn and understand it, not just conquer it. The princess stopped, her expression unreadable. No human had ever spoken to her like this before. She said nothing, but her mind was in motion, turning over his words, questioning her own beliefs about humans. The next challenge was unplanned. As they walked, a sudden tremor shook the city. Crystals fell from floating buildings, and creatures scattered in panic. People screamed, and nobles tried to maintain order. The human acted quickly, assessing the situation. Follow me, he shouted, guiding several attendants and citizens to safety using his knowledge of balance and spatial awareness. He even helped stabilize a small floating bridge by moving objects to counter the sway. The princess watched in astonishment. She had expected chaos, yet this human, her human, remained calm, thinking, solving problems. When the tremor ended, she realized that he had saved several lives that could have been lost. Her heart pounded, though she did not understand why. After the danger passed, they continued their walk, though neither spoke for a while. The princess's mind was racing, filled with confusion, admiration, and something she refused to name. The human, meanwhile, tried to process his own emotions. He realized that he was beginning to respect and even care for this princess, despite her initial mockery. He admired her intelligence, her grace, and the way she ruled her city with both strength and subtlety. Over the next several days, the human continued to learn the ways of the city. He studied its technology, its customs, and even its language, nuances. Each day he faced subtle tests from the princess, tricky questions, complex tasks, and social challenges. Each day he succeeded, sometimes clumsily, sometimes brilliantly, but always with honesty and effort. The princess noticed a change within herself. She found that she was thinking about him more than she cared to admit. She would catch herself observing his movements, wondering how he would react to new challenges, and even anticipating his clever solutions. Her mockery had faded into curiosity, and curiosity was slowly turning into something deeper. One afternoon, she decided to introduce the human to the palace gardens, a place where only nobles and trusted guests could go. The gardens were a wonder, with plants that glowed in soft light, streams that sang as water flowed over crystal stones, and creatures that shimmered like jewels. The princess watched him move among the plants, touching leaves with careful fingers, listening to the sound of water, and marveling at the life around him. "You seem to understand beauty," she said quietly. "Most humans would be afraid or clumsy. You notice." The human smiled. "I believe beauty is in the details. It is everywhere if you take the time to see it. Fear can blind people, but curiosity opens the eyes." The princess's smile softened, and for a moment she felt something she had never experienced before. A sense of admiration, almost respect, mixed with an unfamiliar warmth in her chest. She turned away quickly, afraid to show too much emotion. As the days passed, their bond grew in subtle ways. The human learned from the princess, and she learned reluctantly from him. She discovered that he could think in ways different from her people, solving problems that had seemed impossible. He taught her patience, humility, and the value of looking at the world through another's eyes. One evening, they sat together on a balcony overlooking the city. The sky was a swirl of colors as the twin suns began to set. The princess spoke softly, almost to herself. "You are not like I expected. You are persistent, clever, and strangely admirable." The human looked at her. "I only try to do my best, and I try to learn from those who know more than I do." She said nothing, but her heart felt lighter, confused and more alive than it had in years. She did not yet understand what was happening between them, but she knew one thing. The human was no longer just a visitor to mock. He had become something she could not ignore. That night, as the city's lights shimmered like stars, and the creatures of the garden settled into quiet, the princess lay awake, thinking about the human. She wondered how someone so different could make her feel so unsettled, curious, and intrigued. The human, in his simple chamber, thought about the princess as well, marveling at her grace, intelligence, and the unexpected kindness she sometimes showed him. And so, their relationship deepened, built on challenges, learning, and moments of courage. The human was no longer just the mocked visitor. He was someone who had begun to earn his place in the princess's world, and in her thoughts. The story of their bond had only just begun, and the days ahead promised tests, adventures, and discoveries that would change both of them forever. The human had now been on the alien planet for several weeks, and during that time, he had learned more than he ever imagined possible. He had explored the floating cities, the gardens filled with glowing plants, and the marketplaces bustling with creatures of every shape and color. He had learned the language well enough to converse comfortably, and he had begun to understand the customs, rules, and even the subtle politics of the royal court. But despite all this, his attention remained focused on one being, the princess who had first mocked him so cruelly, yet whose presence now occupied his thoughts more than he cared to admit. For the princess, the human's presence had become a source of both irritation and fascination. She'd begun to notice the way he observed her court with careful eyes, how he treated others with respect, and the calmness he maintained even in challenging situations. Every day, she challenged him in new ways, sometimes with riddles that tested his intellect, sometimes with tasks that tested his courage, and sometimes with situations that tested his empathy. And every day he met the challenges with a mixture of intelligence, patience, and kindness that slowly began to earn her respect. One afternoon, she decided to test him in a more personal way. "Come with me," she said abruptly, leading him to a part of the palace few humans had ever seen. They entered a large chamber filled with intricate holographic maps and models of the galaxy. The princess gestured toward a small planet glowing softly in the center. "This planet is under our protection, but it has become unstable recently," she explained. "If we do not act, its inhabitants could suffer greatly. Tell me, human, how would you approach this situation?" The human examined the holographic planet carefully, noting patterns of energy, orbital paths, and signs of environmental instability. "We must first understand the source of the instability," he said, thoughtfully. "Then we can create solutions that prevent harm, using both your technology and careful planning. Rushing blindly could make things worse." The princess studied him closely. He spoke with calm confidence, and she realized he had a gift for seeing problems from angles she had not considered. She felt a strange mix of pride and unease. Pride because he had impressed her beyond expectation. Unease because she could not deny that she had underestimated him. "Very well," she said, her tone softer than usual. "You may assist with this task, but be warned, failure will not be tolerated." The human nodded, feeling both nervous and honored. Over the next several days, they worked together to analyze the planet's problems. He asked questions, offered ideas, and occasionally suggested unconventional solutions. The princess initially doubted his ideas, but as she watched them succeed, her respect grew. The human was not just clever. He was insightful, adaptable, and genuinely committed to helping others. As they spent long hours together, the princess began to notice small things she had never considered before. He was kind to those around him, offering encouragement to attendants and citizens alike. He did not seek power, wealth, or praise. He sought understanding and solutions. She found herself observing his reactions, noticing the way he smiled when he solved a problem, the way his eyes lit up with curiosity, and the way he remained calm even when others panicked. One evening, after a particularly long day of work, the princess led him to a quiet terrace overlooking the city. The sky was filled with stars and the floating buildings glowed softly below. The human looked around in awe, and the princess found herself enjoying the moment as much as he did. "You seem to find wonder in everything," she said quietly, almost to herself. The human smiled. "I think the world is full of beauty if you take the time to notice it. Even places that seem strange or dangerous can be amazing if you look closely." The princess felt a warmth in her chest, though she could not understand it. She turned away, hoping he would not notice the slight flush on her cheeks. Days passed, and the bond between them continued to grow. They faced new challenges together, negotiating with alien factions, solving crises in the floating cities, and rescuing creatures in danger. Each time, the human demonstrated courage, intelligence, and empathy, and each time the princess found herself quietly admiring him. She had expected him to fail, to stumble, or to be frightened. Instead, he rose to each challenge with determination and grace. Yet even as she admired him, the princess struggled with her own pride. She had been raised to believe that humans were weak, impulsive, and incapable of leadership. How could she admit that this one human had proven her assumptions wrong? She could not. So she teased him, challenged him, and sometimes even mocked him gently. But beneath her words, her respect and fascination continued to grow. One day, while exploring the lower levels of the city, they encountered a group of stranded traders whose floating craft had malfunctioned. The human immediately offered to help, examining the craft and working quickly to repair it. The princess watched in amazement as he calmly assessed the situation, communicated with the traders, and implemented a solution. When the craft stabilized and the traders were able to continue their journey, she realized that he had saved not only the traders, but also potentially hundreds of lives in the surrounding area. for if the craft had fallen, it could have caused damage to the city below. She found herself feeling something unfamiliar, gratitude, and also a strange concern for his safety. She had never worried about anyone like this before. Normally, she trusted her guards and attendants to handle danger, but now she realized that she cared about what might happen to him. That evening, she confronted herself in her private chambers. "Why does this human affect me so?" she whispered, pacing back and forth. "He is clever, brave, and kind, but he is still a human. I am a princess of this world. He should not matter to me like this." Despite her attempts to convince herself otherwise, she could not ignore the truth. She thought about his calm demeanor in crises, the way he treated others with respect, and his unwavering curiosity and determination. Slowly, she admitted to herself that she was beginning to feel something more than respect, something she could not name but could not ignore. The human, meanwhile, was unaware of the storm of emotions his presence had stirred. He focused on his tasks, learning, exploring, and trying to understand the complexities of the princess's world. Yet, even he could not deny that he had grown fond of her. He admired her intelligence, her dedication to her people, and the moments of vulnerability she occasionally allowed him to see. He respected her deeply and felt a connection that went beyond friendship, though he was careful to tread lightly, knowing the boundaries of her world and her status. As the weeks went on, they continued to face challenges together. They solved disputes between alien factions, prevented environmental disasters, and even uncovered plots against the palace. Each time, the human's ingenuity and empathy impressed the princess, and each time, she found herself thinking about him more than she wished to admit. She began to anticipate his actions, wonder about his thoughts, and even seek his input in matters she had previously handled alone. One afternoon, the princess invited the human to join her in the palace library, a vast chamber filled with floating books, glowing scrolls, and archives of knowledge collected over centuries. "I want you to see something," she said, leading him to a section containing historical records of their world. "These stories, they show how our leaders faced challenges, made choices, and grew as individuals. Perhaps you can learn from them as well." The human listened attentively, asking questions and offering insights. He compared the events to situations on Earth, drawing parallels and suggesting solutions. The princess watched him, noticing how he thought differently from her people, how he combined logic, empathy, and creativity in ways that were refreshing and unexpected. By the time the sun set and the city's lights shimmered below, both of them were exhausted but satisfied. They had learned from each other, solved problems together, and shared moments of quiet understanding. The princess felt a mixture of pride and confusion. She was proud of the human, yet confused by the growing feelings she could not yet name. The human felt a deep respect and fondness for her, knowing that their connection had become stronger than mere acquaintance. As they walked back to the palace chambers, a sudden alarm sounded, a warning of a potential threat in the lower city. Without hesitation, the human led the princess and a group of attendants to assess the situation. They discovered a small creature trapped in a collapsing structure. The human acted quickly, coordinating the rescue while ensuring the safety of everyone nearby. The princess assisted where she could, amazed at how calmly and effectively he managed the crisis. When the creature was safe, she realized once again that he was not just clever. He was compassionate, brave, and willing to take responsibility in ways few others would. That night, as they returned to the palace, neither spoke much. Words seemed unnecessary. Their shared experiences, challenges, and quiet moments had forged a bond stronger than either expected. The princess found herself lying awake, thinking about the human and the strange mixture of emotions he stirred within her. The human, too, reflected on the events of the day, feeling a growing connection to the princess and a sense of belonging in a world that had once seemed alien and unreachable. And so, with each passing, the city had never been so tense. Rumors of an approaching threat had spread like wildfire through the floating streets and glittering towers. A faction from a distant planet, seeking to exploit resources and challenge the leadership of the princess's world had begun to move closer, their ships visible in the distance as tiny glimmers at first, then growing larger and more intimidating each day. The princess had faced challenges before, but this threat was unlike any she had encountered. A test not just of skill or courage, but of leadership, strategy, and the loyalty of her people. The human, now familiar with the intricacies of the city, its people, and its technology, stood beside the princess in the war room, a chamber filled with holographic maps, floating indicators, and communication devices. He had observed and learned how her advisors planned defenses, predicted enemy movements, and coordinated the floating city's protective systems. Yet, even among the experienced strategists, the human's mind offered a perspective that was unusual, insightful, and practical. "Human," the princess said, her voice steady but tinged with tension. "I want your advice. We face a challenge that may decide the future of our world. What do you propose?" The human examined the holographic displays carefully, noting the positions of the approaching fleet, the weaknesses in the city's defenses, and the patterns of energy fields that could be manipulated to protect key areas. "We must first protect the civilian population," he said calmly. "Use the floating shields around the residential districts, but leave some traps or illusions to mislead the enemy. We can use their own approach against them if we control their expectations." The princess's eyes widened. This was a human strategy, simple in concept, yet elegant in execution. She nodded slowly, feeling a mixture of pride and surprise. "Very well. We will implement your plan, but it is risky. Are you certain it will work?" The human nodded. "We cannot be certain of everything, but with proper coordination and quick adaptation, it gives us the best chance to minimize damage and save lives." The next days were a whirlwind of preparation. The human worked tirelessly alongside the princess and her advisors. He studied the enemy fleet, suggested defensive measures, and even helped train a group of young cadets in emergency response. The princess observed him closely, noting not just his cleverness but also his courage. He moved among the troops with calm authority, offering encouragement and practical guidance. In every small decision, he showed empathy for the people and decisiveness that inspired confidence. When the enemy fleet finally arrived, the city was ready. Shields hummed with energy, traps and illusions were in place, and defenders awaited orders. The princess and the human stood together on the highest balcony, overlooking the advancing ships. The tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. The first wave of enemy ships approached, and the human quickly coordinated with the city's defense systems. Using his knowledge of patterns and logic, he suggested maneuvers that allowed the floating city to remain protected while causing confusion. Among the attackers, the princess watched in astonishment as her people, guided by his strategies, executed them flawlessly. During the battle, a critical moment came when an enemy strike threatened a residential district. Civilians panicked, and the defenders struggled to respond quickly enough. The human did not hesitate. He sprinted toward the area, directing defenders, stabilizing floating platforms, and ensuring the safety of hundreds of citizens. The princess followed, providing support and coordinating with her advisors, but she could not help noticing how the human moved with courage, calm, and efficiency under pressure. When the immediate danger passed, the princess felt a wave of relief and admiration. She realized that the human was not just clever. He was brave, compassionate, and capable of leadership in ways that few in her world possessed. She felt an unfamiliar warmth in her chest, a sense of connection that went beyond respect or friendship. She had depended on him, trusted him, and seen him succeed in a crisis that could have destroyed the city. The battle continued for hours. The human and the princess worked side by side, coordinating defenses, predicting enemy movements, and solving unexpected problems as they arose. At one point, a critical energy conduit in the city began to fail, threatening to collapse several floating districts. The human quickly assessed the problem, directed a repair team, and used available resources creatively to stabilize the conduit. The princess watched in awe, realizing that without his intervention the damage could have been catastrophic. By the time the enemy retreated, the city had suffered only minor damage, thanks largely to the human strategies and quick thinking. The princess called her advisors together and addressed the defenders. "We owe our safety and our victory not only to our technology and training, but also to someone extraordinary among us," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "This human, this visitor who came from another world, has shown bravery, intelligence, and compassion beyond expectation. Let us honor him for his courage." The court and the city erupted in cheers. The human felt a mix of humility and pride, but his attention remained on the princess. She approached him, her expression unreadable for a moment, then softened as she spoke quietly. "You have done more than I ever imagined. You are remarkable." The human bowed respectfully. "I only did what I thought was right. I could not have done it without your guidance and the support of your people." The princess studied him for a moment, her mind racing. She had thought that she would always see him as a visitor, someone to test and perhaps mock. But now she could not deny the truth. She depended on him, respected him deeply, and, though she struggled to admit it even to herself, she cared for him. She realized that her feelings had grown stronger, changing from curiosity and respect into something far more personal. The days after the battle were filled with reflection and recovery. The city repaired minor damages, celebrated its survival, and honored the defenders. The human and the princess spent time together, reviewing the battle, planning improvements for future safety, and quietly enjoying moments of shared understanding. Their bond had grown stronger, built on trust, admiration, and the experience of surviving a crisis side by side. One evening, the princess invited the human to a quiet terrace overlooking the restored city. The twin suns were setting, casting golden and pink light across the floating towers and shimmering streets. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "I have always believed humans were weak, limited, unworthy of attention. Yet you have proven me wrong in ways I cannot ignore." The human looked at her, sensing the depth of her emotions even in her careful words. "I never wanted to prove anything," he said gently. "I only wanted to do my best and help where I could. I respect your world, your people, and you. That is enough for me." She turned to him fully now, her expression open, vulnerable, and sincere. "You have done more than help. You have changed my understanding of strength, courage, and even of love." For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them was filled with quiet understanding, mutual respect, and the first hints of a bond that went beyond admiration. They had faced danger, solved impossible problems, and relied on each other in ways neither had expected. The human had proven himself indispensable, not just to the city but to the princess herself. As the night fell, stars reflecting off the floating buildings like diamonds, the princess realized that she could not imagine her life without him. She had once mocked him, thought him weak and insignificant. Yet he had shown her what true courage, compassion, and loyalty meant. In doing so, he had earned a place not only in her world, but in her heart. The human, feeling the weight of the day's events, understood that their journey together had reached a turning point. No longer was he merely a visitor or a student of the alien world. He was a partner, trusted and respected, someone who had proven that even across worlds, connection, courage, and understanding could change lives. And so, after the crisis had passed and the city settled back into its rhythm, the princess and the human sat together, reflecting on the challenges they had overcome. Both knew that their bond had transformed, moving from curiosity and respect to something deeper, stronger, and impossible to ignore. The princess had realized that the human was no longer just a visitor. He was someone she could not live without. The city had returned to its usual rhythm, but for the princess and the human, nothing would ever be the same. The events of the HFY recent crisis had left a lasting impact, not only on the city and its people, but on the bond between them. The human had proven himself in ways that words alone could not describe. He had shown courage, intelligence, empathy, and loyalty, and the princess could no longer deny what she had felt for him since the moment they had begun to work together. In the days following the battle, the princess found herself seeking his company more than ever. She would ask for his advice, involve him in decisions, and even accompany him on explorations of the city. Each interaction deepened their understanding of one another. She noticed how he listened, how he observed, and how he treated everyone with respect, regardless of status. She saw the care in his eyes when he helped someone in need, the determination in his voice when he proposed a solution, and the gentleness in his gestures when he reassured frightened citizens. The human,